Sorted after the master race, the history books they tell of their defeat in 45. They all came out of the woodwork on the day the Nazi died. They say the prisoner of Spandau was a symbol of defeat. Whilst Hess remained in prison, then the fascists they would beat. So the promise of an Aryan world would never materialize. So why did they all come out of the woodwork on the day the Nazi died? The world is riddled with maggots. The maggots are getting fat. They're making a tasty meal of all the bosses and bureaucrats. They're taking over the boardrooms and they're fat and full of pride. And they all came out of the woodwork on the day the Nazi died. So if you meet with these historians, I'll tell you what to say. Tell them that the Nazis never really went away. They're out there burning houses down and peddling racist lies. And we'll never rest again until every Nazi dies.
Woke up one morning and there were soldiers. Oh, bella ciao, bella ciao, bella ciao, ciao, ciao. Woke up one morning and there were soldiers. The invasion had begun. Lend me your shoulder, we'll stand together. Oh, bella ciao, bella ciao, bella ciao, ciao, ciao. Lend me your shoulder, we'll stand together. But I feel my time has come, and if I die here for the resistance, oh bella ciao, bella ciao, bella ciao, ciao, ciao. And if I die here for the resistance, you must lay me in my grave among the flowers upon the mountain. Oh bella ciao, bella ciao, bella ciao, ciao, ciao. Among the flowers upon the mountain, let me rest among the brave. Someday the people will pick the flowers. Oh bella ciao, bella ciao, bella ciao, ciao, ciao. Someday the people will pick the flowers, and they will remember my name. This is the flower of the resistance. Oh bella ciao, bella ciao, bella ciao, ciao, ciao. This is the flower of the resistance, and those who died for liberty. This is the flower of the resistance. Oh bella ciao, bella ciao, bella ciao, ciao, ciao. This is the flower of the resistance, and those who died for liberty. This is the flower of our resistance, and those who died for liberty.
From all of you good workers, good news to you I'll tell of how the good old Union has come in here to dwell.
Which side are you on? Which side are you on?
My daddy was a miner and I'm a miner's son, and I'll stick with the Union till every battle's won.
Which side are you on? Which side are you on?
They say in Harlan County there are no neutrals there. You'll either be a Union man or a thug for J.H. Blair.
Which side are you on? Which side are you on?
Oh, workers, can you stand it? Oh, tell me how you can. Will you be a lousy scab or will you be a man?
Which side are you on? Which side are you on?
Don't scab for the bosses, don't listen to their lies. Us poor folks haven't got a chance unless we organize.
Which side are you on? Which side are you on? Which side are you on? Which side are you on?
Street where the lion runs do beat, and the lovely English people walked all over us. And every single night when they tell come home tight, he'd invite the neighbours out with this chorus. Come out, you black and tans, come out and fight me like a man. Show your wife how you won medals down in Flanders. Tell her how the IRA made you run like Galloway from the green and lovely lace of Gilshandra. Tell us how you slew them old Arabs 2 by 2. Like the Zulus, they had nice bows and arrows. Of how brave you faced one with your 16-pounder gun, and you frightened all the natives to the marrow. Come out, you black and tans, come out and fight me like a man. Show your wife how you won medals down in Flanders. Tell her how the IRA made you run like Galloway from the green and lovely lakes of Gilshandra. Let us hear you tell how you stand a brave Parnell and taught him well and truly persecuted. Where are the stares and jeers that you proudly let us hear when our heroes of 16 were executed? Come out, you black and tans, come out and fight me like a man. Show your wife how you won medals down in Flanders. Tell her how the IRA made you run like Galloway from the green and lovely lakes of Gilshandra.
Hello there, hello there, hello there, you delicious bastards. How are we all? I'm very well, thank you for asking. Yes. Apologies I wasn't on yesterday, right? Apologies I wasn't on yesterday, but I couldn't be bothered. I went out and got drunk. What? Did you expect a stream, given that I said I was going to stream? Because if you did, then fall onto you. Anyway. Yes, so. But I am here today. Also, just before we get going, I will also be on Normal Island tomorrow with Lewis on the turn left. So join me for that 7:30 kickoff. Although I might start streaming like 3 minutes before then or something. I don't know, because that's how I roll. So I'll do news about whatever's in the news tomorrow. So it'll probably, I imagine the Iran thing will continue to be the news as well.
Sometimes may be good, sometimes may be shit.
No, war is pretty much always shit. But thank you, Dave. Although, to be fair, the second half of this show will be about a time when war wasn't entirely shit in some respects. Because we're doing Tankie Tuesday. And the second half of it will be the Soviet Storm show. So, yeah, get ready for that. Get ready for the copyright strike of a thing that's already on YouTube anyway. Fuck's sake. Right. So, yes, I'll get my capitalist shilling out of the way at the top of the show.
Finally, those capitalist pigs will pay for their crimes, eh? Hey, comrades, hey!
Stop it. Get some help.
I think I probably should. Yes, you can help me out in the various ways I am about to elucidate for you all. You can, if you're on Twitch, you can hit the follow button. You can subscribe. You can subscribe with Amazon Prime, because that's a thing. You can do bits messages. You can give subs to the community. You can do super chats via the Streamlabs link below. $2 or 200 bits will get you a text to speech. Yes, I've got a Patreon and PayPal. I've got YouTube, Blue Sky, TikTok, Instagram, and Threads. If you're on YouTube, hell the fuck oh to the YouTubers. You can subscribe for now. You can hit the bell icon to get notifications or something occasionally. You can. What else can you do? Fuck's sake. You can become a member for 99 pence, which is like literally no amount of money, basically. You know, come on now, come on. You can give memberships to the community. You can do what do you call it? Super chats. That's the thing you can do there, and super thanks and stuff. Fuck what? Yeah, you get the idea. Anyway, yes. Yeah.
Sometimes may be good, sometimes may be shit.
Okay, we don't need Gennaro Gattuso saying that too many times. I really do need to mix that up a little bit, I think. Where are we? Alert box off. There we go. Thank you, everyone, for things. Well, actually, well, no, I'll read those out before we get going. Get the interruptions over quick. Well, thank you, Wayward Historian, for resubscribing for 1 million months. Just literally 1 million months. They've been subscribed to me. So yeah. And thank you, everyone. Let's get some love in chat for Wayward Historian, who is fucking dope. Thank you, Davey B, with 13 months. Thank you, Nick the Peasant, with 12 months. A year, Nick. Really? And thank you, Carl Brown, for gifting 5 memberships. Much love to you all. Now, tonight's proceedings are self-indulgent in a number of ways. But they're self-indulgent in a way that hopefully sheds some light on a thing for you all. But it's mainly about my opinions on a thing, which is sort of the stream in total, I guess, but whatever. Anyway, it is self-indulgent, but based upon a commenter, that's right, chat. Dear Chatterinos, I do occasionally think about you all. People may or may not remember. It was probably about a month ago now. Someone popped in and said, asked me the very sort of, I don't know, straightforward, direct question. Had my opinions on tankies changed? And I gave a kind of nothingy kind of answer to it, really, because I wasn't really prepared for it. I wasn't expecting the question. And I suppose I hadn't really thought about it a lot. This series, for all of the new people, this series of shows called Tankie Tuesday, the joke of which being that I never managed to actually do many of them on a Tuesday, so it became a point of like pride for me to never do one on a Tuesday, which is ironic because I'm now doing this one on a Tuesday, hence the title. Was it 2 months ago now? Jesus Christ, time flies when you're wasting your fucking life, Kev. Anyway, so someone asked me that question. I gave a kind of nothing sort of answer to it. But it sort of stuck with me, and I've been thinking about it, ruminating upon it since the interaction took place. On and off, not solidly for 2 fucking months, obviously, but like, you know, occasionally it would pop into my head, and I was sort of ruminating upon this. So I thought I'd sort of give you a few thoughts on my opinions on tankies, I guess. This bit, I might put this bit up on YouTube if it's of any, like, if it's cogent in the slightest, which, given that I don't have notes, it's probably not going to be, but, you know, anyway. So where am I at with tankies? Right, I haven't done this show, Tankie Tuesday, for quite some time, because, frankly, I haven't felt it necessary to do it, if that makes sense. Tankies are, how do I put this delicately, not the biggest deal. They're not the thing that needs to be tackled right now. They're sort of, I mean, in a broader sense, they're defeatist and a sort of historical affect, if nothing else. Like, they're not worth anything. They're not, and I don't mean that as an individual, like, moral conclusion or anything like that. I mean, as a movement, they're not really important. They're loud and annoying in some respects, but they're not. Like, they don't. And again, I'm being purposefully sort of Eurocentric or West-centric, whatever you want to call it, because I realise there are groups outside of the West that are vaguely ML or whatever that are worthwhile. And I suppose we should define what we mean by tanky. It's difficult. It's difficult and nuanced to say exactly what a tanky is, really. It sort of means Marxist-Leninist, but not exactly. It sort of means people who defend historical examples of what they like to refer to as actually existing socialism. But again, there are going to be niche examples of individuals who don't necessarily fall under my rubric or whatever. You could refer to them as Stalinists, I guess, but I mean, there are probably people who are tankies who are like Maoists rather than specifically Stalinists, and you get very weird examples of people like fucking Hosierists and weird shit like that. So look, there are a number of nuances and fuzziness around the edges, but that doesn't mean that the word tanky isn't applicable, even though it's used very broadly by a number of people who are essentially fucking liberals who would just like to scream at people because they're fucking idiots. But yeah, so it's purposefully sort of, I'm leaving it, going to leave it sort of relatively vague there. But you know, people who are dogmatists, basically, yeah, kind of dogmatists. And obviously, being a historical nerd that I am, I'm very, I don't even know, annoyed, offended, disgusted by the way in which they will lie on behalf of historical examples, to try and cherry pick bits that they like, downplay unbelievable human rights abuses, and stuff. But it goes beyond that. It goes beyond it being just a matter of them defending historical examples, because essentially, in a legitimate kind of direct sense, history both matters and doesn't matter. It does matter, and I'll get to that in a second, but it doesn't matter in the sense that just because you would defend a historical thing doesn't necessarily mean that you are that thing. But it clearly does matter in terms of people's defence of it, because it informs me about the kind of thing you would be tolerable to you if it happened today. So, for instance, if we got into a let's imagine a historic example taking place right now, where not a historic example, a completely new socialist revolution takes place, right? And we now have a socialist government in position in let's say Britain. Fuck it, that's where I am, right? So we have the People's Republic of Great Britistan or whatever, and given that tankies have defended things like, you know, deportations and, you know, alliances with fucking fascists and all kinds of disgusting shit, mass murder, ethnic cleansing, imperialist endeavour, etc. It suggests to me that were the new Socialist Republic of Britain to engage in those same activities, they would also defend those things as well. That given that they defend it historically, they may very well defend and support it now, up to and including, you know, engaging in those things like, you know, mass murder of political opponents and such. And when I say political opponents, I don't just mean fascists. I know tankies like to accuse everyone who opposes them of being a fascist, but I mean, like, okay, the example I would give, right? The word tanky itself comes from, well, two sources really. For the initial actual etymology of the term comes from the Hungarian uprising of 1956, but it becomes popularised after the Prague Spring uprising of, was it 68? Something like that, whatever year it was. both of which were stamped out by the Soviet Union in order to keep their satellite states, their essentially imperialist gains from the Second World War. And this is my point, right? The people who opposed that regime weren't necessarily asking for the end of socialism. In fact, there were many people who were members of the Communist Party who joined those revolutions precisely because they wanted a better socialism, one that wasn't dominated from Moscow, one where they could do socialism in their own particular way, according to their own national character and such. And it was stamped out by the Soviet Union at the barrel of a gun, or indeed at the barrel of a tank, hence Tankie, right? And if you stop progressive left-wing change to your rule, eventually you leave no other option but for people to become revanchist, nationalist freaks. And so when you have the eventual revolutions of 89 to 91, it's no surprise, really, looking back, that when you stamp out any left-wing opposition to your rule, the only people who are left to take over are, at best, liberals, but mostly right-wingers. And so you get people like Boris Yeltsin and the various kind of neoliberal ghoul bootlickers that took over the former Soviet nations, or former socialist nations of Eastern Europe. Because you destroyed any opposition to you in any way whatsoever. And that means that essentially, if you're going to defend all of these things constantly, it means that you're going to make the same fucking mistakes in the future. For all of the quote-unquote self-crit that Marxist-Leninists like to pretend they engage in, they actually don't really think that the Soviet Union did things that were wrong. Which makes me think you'd make the same fucking mistakes, quote-unquote mistakes, as that regime did. And so you're a dead end, politically speaking. So I haven't felt it necessary to cover them, in all honesty. And especially that, given that they're not, politically they're not the target we need to be going for now, given that we have the rise of the far right in the UK, and indeed across Europe, across the world. We have literally a fucking warmongering Zionist piece of shit in the White House currently bombing the fuck out of Iran. That's a much more pressing concern than Duce fucking Dave on Twitter pretending to give a fuck about the purges or whatever, you know. It's not relevant. So to that person, has my opinion changed on tankies? Yeah, a bit. A bit. But not in like a positive direction or even a negative direction. In a kind of nothing direction. In a various directions. It's a bit weird and complicated. Do I consider them comrades? I'm sure there are some people who have been labelled tankies, or might even ironically label themselves tanky, who in the fight against fascism would be a worthwhile person to have at your side. But that ultimately, I'm not their comrade in the sense that they would happily use force upon me. And this is the point, I think, ultimately that I have with tankies. However much they might preach good economics, and I'm sure many of them do, and many of them may support, you know, queer rights and ethnic and national equality and things like that, you know, good, you know, general internationalism and stuff like that. Their use of authoritarianism renders them ultimately fucking useless to me. Because I sort of don't care whether it's a Nazi boot on my neck, or a communist boot on my neck, or a liberal boot on my neck. The problem is, there's a fucking boot on my neck. The economics of the person with their boot on my fucking neck don't matter when my neck really fucking hurts. Now, people may accuse me of being self-interested in that respect. But as I've mentioned before, defending your own rights or defending somebody else's rights is never just about that. Defending your own rights is never just about defending your own rights. And defending somebody else's rights is not just about defending somebody else's rights. It's about defending everybody's rights. The state, for me, is not something that is supreme. I don't see it as that, and I don't ever respect it as that. It has to justify its own actions. And in Tankie land, that's not the way it works. In Tankie land, you can just imprison people for being gay. That's just allowable, apparently. You can gulag people for... And not just that, but gulag their families as well for daring to oppose the government. And that's not tolerable to me. Defending my own rights is defending everybody's rights. Because again, the Niemoller poem is genuinely, if I need to drill this into people's head 1,000,000 times, I will. It's not just a fantastic piece of literature. It's an actual description of the reality that a person went through. That allowing a government to pick away at the rights of other people, even people you don't particularly like, ultimately will rebound upon you. And allowing them to pick upon your rights will impact upon other people as well, whether you're in the in-group or out-group. So it's not just a selfish interest to not want to have a boot on my neck myself. It's that I don't think that the people wielding the boot have a right to do so to fucking anybody. And tankies feel very differently about that. And that's why we can't be friends. I'm sorry. Again, I don't see you as the enemy for today, because we have the rise of the far right, and we have horrific warfare taking place, and all sorts of genocidal shit going down. But that I know that if you ever got anywhere near the reins of power, you would become what you've always become. Authoritarian madmen. Sorry. Anyway, sort of on that point, I wanted to take a look at a video from Hakeem, who is, I think, actually a very good video maker. I disagree with their politics to some extent, but they're a very good video maker. And undoubtedly a tankie, a person who defends people like Joseph Stalin, etc., right? And this video, I think, to a certain extent anyway, outlines some of the point. Israel does have nuclear weapons, but that's not necessarily relevant for the time period we're talking, or the topic at hand. Where's the... hang on. Boom, there we go. It is still true, but not necessarily relevant at this particular moment. Yes. This video, I think, to some extent elucidates the points, or allows me to sort of, as a jump-off point, to talk about the things I've just sort of mentioned. So it's, does communism always lead to dictatorship? ? And the problem that I have with a number of tankies is that they don't really oppose dictatorship. They just deny it exists. Which is just fucking stupid. And dishonest. Very stupid and very dishonest.
Hi there.
Hello.
Let's debunk some common anti-communist talking points. Today's common claim that you hear goes as such. Communism is authoritarian. Communism always leads to dictatorship, or things to that effect. Let's break this.
Right. I will just say, Marxism-Leninism is authoritarian. Marxism-Leninism always leads to dictatorship. Because those things are true. What is this, 255?
To be clear...
The truth about tankies, what's this?
Here right off the bat. Whenever I've used the term tankie, it's referencing a specific type of self-styled anti-imperialist, mostly positioned in the global north. In my opinion...
Well, that, I mean, firstly, I would disagree with that definition, because I don't see them as anti-imperialists. They may describe themselves as anti-imperialists, but tankies are not anti-imperialist. Tankies are imperialists. It's just they think imperialism isn't really imperialism if you do it with a red flag. They are as close as it gets to horseshoe theory, but horseshoe theory is still shit. But they make it seem vaguely plausible as a concept, because they do engage in some of the same things. But, you know. What is the bet that on authority will be brought? Oh, yeah, absolutely. Yeah. The Frederick Engels essay on authority, which, by the way, is a load of old shite. Oh, yeah, no, he did say self-styled. Apologies, yes. Anyway, yeah, the Frederick Engels essay on authority is ludicrous. But tankies think it's like an absolute home run of a thing. And it's basically just, yeah, we're allowed to do that because it's a revolution and that. So you have to be authoritarian. Nah. And it's just the same... It's the same fucking tired defeatist bullshit. Things are shit. You have to put up with it. No, I fucking don't. No, I do not.
This down. This claim rests on a few faulty premises, and most importantly, it ignores the historical complexity of the countries in question. Former socialist countries were not all the same, of course, and their political systems developed within very different historical contexts. Many of them emerged from far more repressive systems before, like Tsarist autocracies or fascist dictatorships, colonial regimes, or monarchies. In several cases, in fact in all of them, the socialist governments that replaced those systems introduced far broader political participation than what previously existed. That's what context.
Well, that's clearly not true in a number of cases. That's clearly and obviously not true. For all of the faults of the Weimar Germany, it was significantly more democratic than East Germany was. That's just true. The same is true in places like the Czech Republic, or Czechoslovakia, I should say, because, you know, things change, don't they? Yeah, there are various countries where, I mean, clearly and obviously that's not the case. Now, it's again, he does make a good point about the varied ways in which socialism came to be in these places, and the historical precedents and all the rest of it. But and there are definitely examples of participatory engagement from the proletariat that had previously had none. So that's fine. But, like, again, it's sort of dishonest in a sense, because people like Hakim, and I don't know exactly his position on North Korea, but they will claim that North Korea is a democracy. You know, the kind of democracy where you get to be the leader if you came out of your dad's balls. Yeah, that kind of definite democracy. And before anyone points out, yes, I live in the UK, which has the same system where the head of state comes out of the right set of bollocks. Yes, I'm aware of that. It's not a democracy here either. The same is true to a degree in America as well, of course, where Elon Musk gets to just buy an election. That's just a thing. It's not really a democracy then, is it?
Context is and why it's important. But it's also misleading to assume that democracy only exists or is real by some criteria if it takes the Western multi-party liberal format. Many so-called democratic countries, particularly wealthy Western ones, aren't really all that democratic when you scrutinize who actually decides policy. I made a whole video about this here. In countries like the Soviet Union, Cuba, Vietnam, China, and much of the Eastern Bloc, political participation often operated through mass organizations, workers' councils, trade unions, community groups, and local...
How dare you? How dare you say, oh, because it was through trade unions. The Soviet Union crushed trade unions and then instituted, like, one trade union, which wasn't really a trade union because it just did whatever the government wanted. It's disgusting, really.
Assemblies. While these systems had some limitations and made serious mistakes at times, they did involve forms of civic engagement that extended beyond simply.
How can you say this? Genuinely, this is the problem. This is what I mean. They're not against dictatorship. They just pretend it isn't real. He's going on about people's engagement while showing Joseph fucking Stalin on the screen. Literally, actually Stalin. The decades-long, brutal, fucking lunatic dictator. Unbelievable. This is what I mean. I can't be comrades with people like this, because ultimately, if a new Stalin was to rise, they'd happily support it. They'd fucking support him.
Voting between competing parties every few years, only to not have anything meaningfully change. Privatization is an excellent example of the above in capitalist countries. Take a look at this video for a deep dive if you're interested. The presence of a dominant or single ruling party is usually something that is pointed out, but that doesn't automatically mean that there was no diversity in policy debate or governance. Even within one-party systems, like the USSR, the range of political and economic policies implemented over time could, and in fact did, vary significantly depending on leadership, internal debates, and material conditions.
Not the will of the people, though, at any point. You'll notice... Oh my god, okay.
USSR.
Again, so democracy is rule of people, right? So it's the people ruling themselves, deciding their own shit, right? Notice the criteria he uses for what he considers to be the way in which democracy ought to operate.
The range of political and economic policies implemented over time could, and in fact did, vary significantly depending on leadership, internal debates, and material conditions.
Not what the people wanted. Not the people deciding for themselves. You know, leadership and that. So you're just a supporter of fucking dictatorship then? You're literally just supporting dictatorship. The fact that the next dictator had a slightly different policy than the previous dictator, they're still both just fucking dictators. That's not fucking like... Oh my god, my brain's gonna fucking explode. That's not democracy. That's not a symbol of like a range of ideas and people discuss. No, that's just two different fucking dictators deciding differently and imposing that shit on people. This is madness. You're not a demand. You know, you don't support democracy. Like for me, socialism is about emancipation, it's about self-determination, and it's about democracy. Right? It's about freedom. And tankies don't believe that. Fundamentally, they don't actually believe that. They are rigid authoritarians with Marxist economics. That's it. Nick Fuentes likes Stalin. Well, look, I'm not going to poison the well with that shit. Like, yeah, Nick Fuentes is an authoritarian, so I'm not surprised he likes Stalin. But the fact that Nick Fuentes likes Stalin, I don't care. Nick Fuentes loves cock secretly. That doesn't mean that people who like cock are bad. Like, we can judge Stalin by his own actions, rather than the fact that, you know, Nick Fuentes likes him.
The People's Republic of China has the CPC at its head, the Communist Party of China. But the variety...
Yeah, it's a dictatorship. Yeah.
In political and especially economic policy from 1950 to 1990, just to use a particular example.
Okay, so it's not a dictatorship because the totally not dictator Mao was trying sort of to achieve socialism, whereas the dictator fucking Deng Xiaoping decided, oh, let's not even bother with the socialism. Let's just do dictatorship but with capitalism. You know, socialist Nike stores, etc., etc. Yeah. Socialism with Chinese characteristics. Yeah, okay, babe.
Was wider and more expansive than the entirety of, for example, American history.
Yeah, because America went capitalism, 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 capitalism. Whereas China went like kind of socialism, capitalism, capitalism, capitalism. So yeah, if you want to say that, yeah, they did. There is more scope in the modern history of China economically than there is in America. That's true, but they're both still just capitalists. This isn't socialism in any respect.
In contrast, many modern Western liberal democracies have multiple parties, but policy outcomes are fairly narrow in scope, especially on issues like foreign policy, climate action, immigration, and economic austerity, regardless of what party is in power. The US has two dominant party structures which can't be shaken, but there's also near uniformity on all aspects of government aside from tertiary cultural issues. From foreign to economic policy, it's basically the same party.
Do you think democracy has ever actually existed? In part, yeah. Yeah. And I don't deny that there are elements of socialist countries that have engaged in democracy. I think things like, the people's councils and Soviets and such are a form of democracy. That's fine. In Britain, we have sort of democracy. In America, they kind of have democracy a bit. But none of them are remotely acceptable in my eyes. None of them go nearly far enough in my eyes. Call me a crazy utopian, but I think people can govern themselves.
And the United States is the prototypical capitalist country. Back to the video in just a minute, but first a word from today's sponsor, Incogni.
We're not going to do the Boers comic. He does have to live, so capitalism, etc., etc. I mean, I am very smart, but I'm not going to make that criticism, because I am smart. Let's get past the advert.
Capitalist societies currently function as dictatorships of capital, where economic elites and concentrated...
Yeah, 255, I saw the fucking thing, yes. Oh, look, there's Elon Musk. Paedophile.
Wealth heavily influences political outcomes, limiting any meaningful public choice despite the appearance of pluralism. You can have a million parties, but if the top echelon is entirely captured and controlled by the interests of the wealthiest in society, it doesn't matter who you can vote for, because they won't...
Is he describing China or America? It's difficult to know.
Won't serve your interests. My buddy Second Thought made a great video on that topic regarding specifically the United States here, which I recommend you check out. Equating democracy solely with liberal multi-party electoral competition really narrows the concept. Socialist systems historically developed alternative forms of participation: mass organizations, workers' congresses, consultative structures, neighborhood committees, trade unions, and structured party mass linkages.
No, the Soviet Union destroyed trade unions. This is the annoying thing. They don't actually support trade unions. Like, if you want to go down this line, you can say, well, they had a trade union the Labour Front existed in Nazi Germany, or China has one trade union. But they're not really trade unions, are they? Because it's not workers collectively deciding to fight for their own fucking rights. It's the state imposing a pretend union on everybody. That isn't a fucking union. It's a state. It's an organ of state control over people. It's authoritarian. It's dictatorial.
Ruling party in many...
But again, you can pretend. It's all fucking pretense with these people. It's all pretense. If we just call it a democracy, it's a democracy. If we just call it socialism, it's socialism. If we call it a trade union, that means it's a trade union.
Many socialist states function not like a narrow elite, but as a mass political organization with internal debate, ideological education...
I've turned my voice up, thank you.
...and structured participation. Membership was usually open to those willing to engage seriously with the political program and organizational work. Now, if you think this is enough or not doesn't really matter. The history of historical socialisms clearly show that they weren't devoid of political participation. The claim that communism inevitably leads to authoritarian dictatorship lacks historical proportion and context.
You know what? That is true. if we just take that in isolation for a second, that sentence is completely true. The idea that communism inherently leads to dictatorship is devoid of historical nuance. This is true. I will add what I consider to be the historical nuance here. And again, we go back to things like Hungary and the Prague Uprising and so on. When the people of a place try to get a progressive change to a governing structure, to policies, to the repressive way in which governments have tended to operate, and they are crushed at the barrel of a tank for doing so, what you do there is just impose dictatorship. It's not that communism has to naturally go that way, it's that because of the authoritarian nature of the Marxist-Leninist state, it does end up that way. So, if you take a more actually participatory approach to things, you can end up in a situation where you don't end up in a dictatorship. But Marxism-Leninism will never allow for that scope. It will never, ever, ever allow for it. Because it can't. Because it's all about state power. Like, the very annoying thing is, if you read Marx, the end goal of, like, well, it's not really an end goal because it's about analysing history, really. But ultimately, Marx is aiming for a hopefully stateless, classless society. And Marxism-Leninism, or Marxist-Leninists, because an ism doesn't do anything, it's an idea or a set of ideas. Marxist-Leninists pretend that their vanguardist approach to things is an effort to try and get to that state. Or, should I say, that statelessness. But it isn't. They fetishize the power of the state. They are not interested remotely in getting to that stateless society. They may sometimes genuinely think they are, but they're not. They want to be the ones wearing the fucking jackboots. They want to be the ones imposing their will. And then theoretically, maybe in a million fucking years, we can get to the statelessness. Anarchities, you know, all of that shit, right? So they've basically given up. It's defeatist. It's absolutely defeatist. It's basically saying, I don't think socialism can exist. So let's just dress up in a fucking... Let's wrap ourselves in a red flag and pretend we're going to get there in a million years. And just do the same ruling class, top-down, fucking authoritarian shit that everywhere else does. But we can pretend that we've got the moral high ground because we call each other comrade instead of master and servant. It's hypocrisy. As well as authoritarianism, which is just shit. So, communism does not necessarily need to lead to dictatorship. Marxist-Leninism does. Naturally. When you're only... Look, it's the old thing about, to a hammer, every problem looks like a nail. To a Marxist-Leninist, every call for change looks like fascism. Because that's the only thing they ever see. And what do you do with a fascist? You make them into a good one. And there's only one type of good one, isn't there? So it doesn't matter if it's a long-time member of the Communist Party calling for a change. They're a fascist. Doesn't matter if it's someone who literally defected from, you know, capitalism to go and live in the Soviet Union or East Germany or wherever because they wanted to put themselves at the service of socialism. If they make any critique whatsoever, they're a fascist. Doesn't matter if they've worked themselves up through the party fucking strata. If they oppose the leadership in any way whatsoever, they're a right deviationist or a left deviationist. They're a fascist. To every ice pick, every problem looks like the scalp of Trotsky.
People who say this, for whatever reason, and despite owning no capital or means of production of their own, usually say it in order to claim capitalism is a superior system. So, a comparison is in order. Capitalism and its political institutions developed gradually over several centuries, from the late 1500s through colonial expansion, forceful and imperialist-driven industrialization, and modern imperial consolidation of their assets, colonies, and so on and so forth, even going to unequal exchange and value transfers. These are tired topics I've discussed a million times before. If you're new here, then maybe this is too high level of a concept right now. Just understand that the same things that were happening during colonialism are still technically happening today, just in different forms. Regardless, even after that, political stability in capitalist systems has, for the most part, been limited to the imperial core, the so-called West. Outside of the so-called West, capitalist development has very often produced instability, coups, dictatorships, and economic dependency, usually driven by imperial core foreign policy and its economic interests.
To be okay, I mean, it's not really that relevant to the point overall kind of points and things, but actually, even in the what we now know as the imperialist core in the West, capitalism led to many of those same problems as well. Because when you have a change of the kind of ruling elite, even if they have exactly the same basic interests in top-down authoritarianism and control and blah, 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 there's going to be frictions of power. So the old ruling gentry and aristocracy being overtaken by this new breed of nouveau riche capitalist entrepreneur, wealth creators, all that shit, right? Industrialists. That was ultimately going to lead to friction and tension in terms of the ruling class. And if you go back to the old Punch magazine comics and cartoons and stuff about how the royalty was now bowing down to the industrialist rather than the other way around, like that's naturally going to happen. And so you ended up with revolutions and institutions of liberal democracy, but then also there were parts where there was dictatorship, and there were military dictatorships and coups and various things over the course of the last. Look, I mean, you mentioned it went on for 500 years. The idea that in the West that this was like some sort of much more peaceful transition is just not necessarily true, really. I suppose the difference being is that capitalist development outside of the global north took place against the backdrop of the pre-existing imperialist, already economically developed, or whatever you want to call it, industrialized nations fucking with those people via imperialism. So I imagine that China's industrial development would have been very different had Britain not fought two massive wars to try and continue to sell them opium. And stealing Hong Kong as well. But, yeah. Do you know what I mean? Like, they had to put up with that shit as well. Opium is not awesome. It's Big Zebra. Stop it.
Despite this, socialism is judged on the basis of a relatively small number of historical attempts, many of which existed for only a few decades under extreme conditions. Critiquing socialism on this basis is like watching a toddler attempt to walk, seeing it fall a few times, and declaring the entire project a failure. Oh, and you also shot the toddler in the knees several times.
Okay. And now we get into it, right? So, to use your analogy, the toddler in this particular occasion could have had a chance of walking had, let's say, Stalin not pushed him over and then gulagged him. And when you talk about the shooting in the knees of communists, that did happen in a number of places. We've had butchery against communists in various parts of the world, right? You can look into them. Indonesia and Africa, South America, Europe even, whatever, But you know who killed loads and loads of communists as well? The Soviet Union. The Soviet Union killed loads of communists. Because again, Marxism-Leninism isn't really about the achieving of communism. It's about the consolidation of power. It's dictatorship. It's authoritarian. That's it. USSR was immediately invaded by imperialist powers, for fuck's sake. That's true. I'm not denying that. Yeah, absolutely it was. Yeah. Okay. And? Does that excuse what, fucking killing loads of communists in the 20s and 30s? No. No, it doesn't. Like, you can't just point to external pressures, because everywhere had external pressures, and not everywhere collapsed. That's the problem. Being authoritarian didn't fucking work. Because if it did, where are they? Why don't they exist now? You think America didn't have external powers, external pressures upon itself? It's still there. The USSR is not. I'm just thirsty for Trotsky's bussy kip. No, I fucking hate Leon Trotsky. He's a prick. Like, this is ultimately the truth that's going to annoy tankies more than anything, because they're fucking freaks. But Stalin and Trotsky had a lot more in common than they had separating them. Like, a lot more. They were both authoritarian, warmongery fucking shithouses. If you look at the way in which Trotsky dealt with, I mean, things like Kronstadt, but whatever, his role in the Russian Civil War, as mentioned by our tanky friend in chat there. You know, they were invaded, and they were invaded. People forget that. America, Britain, various other places invaded Russia just after the First World War. Doesn't get taught that, does it? Happened though. What was I saying? Oh yeah, sorry, if you look at the way in which Trotsky acted when he had the power to act, before he was eventually purged for left deviationism, etc. Before Stalin began his consolidation of power and all of that jazz. Or I suppose during that process, whatever. He was an authoritarian, bloodthirsty piece of shit. Like, the reason, ironically, the reason he gets more of a pass in Western liberal circles or whatever, is because in order to combat Stalinism, the West were more than happy to promote people like Trotsky or the writings of Orwell or whatever, right? Even though they didn't agree with those things, like they weren't. Look, Orwell was a socialist. Trotsky was a socialist. They didn't agree with these fucking people, but they opposed Stalin and they opposed the USSR's system, and so they were happy to promote those things. And so now we think of like Trotsky. Oh, he banged Frida Kahlo. What a lovely guy. He was cool and peaceful. No, he wasn't. No, he absolutely fucking wasn't. Leon Trotsky can do one as well. Like, I do ice pick jokes because they're funny, and it was fucking 80 years ago. Who gives a shit? But I don't think he necessarily deserved to get ice picked. But the fact that he did, I ain't gonna lose any fucking sleep over him. The man was a shithouse.
Socialism in power was an evolving historical project, not a finished model. When socialist movements came to power, they did so under severe constraints. Most inherited deep economic underdevelopment, often emerging from feudal systems, colonial domination, fascist regimes, or some other form of extreme poverty. On top of these structural
He did. Why did he? Also, hello there, Mr. Tankie. Yeah, why did he? I presume you mean he did as in he did deserve to get ice picked. Please tell me why you think that is true.
limitations, they faced deep hostility from Western capitalist powers, usually in the form of wars, invasions, sanctions, economic sabotage, and covert destabilization efforts. We saw many of this type of action in Venezuela just recently. Internal opposition, both real and imagined, further restricted the room for maneuvering. These pressures significantly shaped governance.
No, I know, Elliot. I'm only playing.
Limitations on civil liberties, for example, were not an inbuilt option of socialism. but were often imposed in a context of siege conditions. There were no, for example, civil liberties for fascists or other reactionary groups in many socialist states. For some reason.
Okay, but there weren't many civil liberties for non-fascists either. That's the problem. It's like, if you just accuse everyone you don't like of being a fascist, then you don't need to give anyone freedoms at all, do you? Which is essentially the problem here. Was Trotsky a fascist? I mean, I presume Stalinists would say he was. And again, ultimately, this is why I think the Soviet Union ended up failing. It's because they purged any chance of there ever being a left-wing change within socialism. There was never any fucking chance that progressive change could happen, because every time they tried it, the tanks would roll in. So all that was left was revanchist, nationalist scum. So in 1989 and beyond, who took over? Because all the leftist possibilities had been destroyed. So rightists win. Undercover saboteur. What Trotsky was? His cover wasn't very good, was it?
A common point of criticism, by the way. Why would you want to give civil liberties to organized fascists? Really makes you think about the intention of those leveling the criticism. Anyways.
See, again, if you criticize the Soviet Union for not giving people civil liberties, that must mean you're in league with fascists. It really makes you wonder. No, I'm not calling for you to give fascists freedoms. I'm saying your average person who lived in the Soviet Union should have had some freedom. It's just some fucking freedom would have been good, wouldn't it? But if you make that point, you're a fascist. Is it any wonder people turn against it? Is there any wonder that you can't, like... Marxist-Leninism is so fucking defeatist, so pathetically defeatist, that it ends up killing any chance it has of keeping people as supporters, essentially. That's why all of these groups are so dwindling, especially in the West, because you're basically saying socialism is impossible, and if you disagree, you're a fascist. It's infuriating. It really is. The children of feudal peasants went to space. Yeah. Yeah, they did. Yeah. I don't hate the people of the Soviet Union, my friend. Some of those achievements are fucking incredible. They went from being a feudal backwater to a significant European power in 20 years, were then destroyed by war and became one of the global superpowers within an even shorter period of time. Magnificent achievements. I'm not fucking denying these things. But again, ultimately, where the fuck are they now? If your system was so fucking superb, where are you? Let's be having you, etc. You're not, like, it didn't ultimately work. And again, another problem, because I'm sure you'll say they weren't harsh enough or whatever. You're always one purge from getting there, aren't you? This is the problem with authoritarianism and why it doesn't fucking work long term. Because you're always just one purge away. You're always just one more... You're one more slaughter away. You're one more gulagging away from getting there. And of course, it isn't really true. You just end up circling the drain until, again, there are no more people left to defend your system.
Limitations weren't placed only because fascism was seen as fundamentally destructive, but also because governments operating under existential threat are reluctant to give political tools to forces aligned with, often, hostile external powers. This point cannot be understated. For much of its history, socialism has functioned under siege conditions. China may be the first socialist country to partially emerge from this dynamic, but it
Because it's capitalist. It's just capitalist. There's no socialism here.
continues to face intense geopolitical pressure.
Everywhere it does. Oh my fucking god. Do you think, like, okay, America, and I'm going to say it, right? America is bad. Call me crazy, right? So, I'm not here fucking defending America for a moment. But America still exists. Capitalist America still exists. Do you think it didn't face external fucking threats? Do you think it didn't face internal threats? It survived. It won. The Cold War was a definitive win for America. And yet it faced external threats, internal threats. It was literally bombed by the Japanese. Its fucking naval forces in the Pacific were minimal after that point. It's faced enormous social pressures. And yet it survived. What was it about your system that meant it couldn't face those same pressures and survive? And it's a shame in some respects that, well, it's a shame in many respects that socialism in these places failed, because not only was it bad that those potential experiments were fucked over by Stalinist autocracy, but it ultimately meant that the West has now given up even the pretense of giving a fuck about the poor of its own countries. Because what are you going to do? There's no alternative. So now all of the social pressures, social welfare systems and safety nets are being torn away, and the freedoms, which were used as a way of saying, we're better, look, we're better than the Soviet system, blah, blah, blah. You can call our leaders a bunch of cunts and you won't be arrested, etc., etc., are now also being stripped away. Because they don't need to. Because there's no threat anymore. I agree with Tankies to one extent that the fall of the Soviet Union was a geostrategic nightmare. In a number of ways. But that doesn't mean that it was a good system, because it clearly wasn't.
Now, this does not automatically justify every act of repression. In fact, we should ruthlessly criticize those actions or mistakes. But this complicates the claim that repression was purely ideological or inherent to socialism. A fair question is whether any political system subject...
Yeah, again, it's not inherent to socialism, it's inherent to Marxism and Leninism. Yeah.
...to similar pressures would respond differently. Historical examples from capitalist states during wartime or until a crisis suggest that centralization and repression are not unique to socialist governance, and were usually tame in comparison to, for example, modern forms of repression and surveillance common in the US despite peacetime. Usually, in attempts of maintaining their colonies, imperial coronations did far, far worse to colonial populations, despite claiming to be bringing democracy to their colonies. Socialism represents, just like capitalism, a long historical transition. Moving from capitalism towards socialism is not an instantaneous shift, just like moving from feudalism or other pre-capitalist formations into capitalism wasn't an immediate process. These things unfold through stages. In early stages, strong centralization may be necessary to stabilize development, defend political and economic sovereignty, coordinate all the necessary social and economic shifts that would need to take place. Under capitalism, this was done in order to enrich a very narrow slither of the population while forcing the rest of the population into urban factories, with the usual working 16 hours a day, no healthcare, children dying of lung diseases at 20 years old, so on and so forth, because they were thrown in the mines. I think you understand what I'm trying to get at. Under socialism, this form of coordination was instead done to provide all with decent housing, access to education and healthcare, and a respectable economic life. What I mean is that centralization is not the final aim of socialism, but a feature of transitional conditions.
See, goes back to the point I was making earlier. They will claim that this is a matter of transition, but for the Tankie it isn't. The Tankie is not interested in ever giving up that power, because as with capitalist ruling elites, they're not going to give up their power peacefully. Neither would the socialist authoritarians. People who believe ultimately in the power of the state or the party or whatever are never ever going to give that up peaceably. They're just not going to. They didn't achieve it peacefully, they're not going to give it up peacefully.
Kind of forced on them by scarcity, hostility, and whatever they've inherited beforehand, either socioeconomic-wise or politically. Historical comparisons also matter. Many social states dramatically expanded literacy, healthcare access, women's participation in public life, industrial capacity, and social mobility compared to the societies they replaced. And many likewise surpassed far wealthier imperialist core countries who had a huge head start in peaceful development over said socialist countries. That's the scientific consensus, actually, that historical socialisms provided a better quality of life at equal levels of economic development despite all the sanctions and sabotage and other limitations leveled against it. Likewise, for all this talk of democracy, many of these socialist nations had to fight off American-backed counter-revolution that aimed to install military dictatorships in order to benefit the interests of American businesses and capital. I cover this at further detail in my CIA assassinations video here. A more useful way to frame this question is not to begin with the assumption that socialism inevitably produces dictatorship, but to ask a series of comparative and structural questions. Compared to what historical baseline? Under which material conditions? How are we defining democracy? And are capitalist states actually free from class domination or oppression, surveillance or coercion? Often the claim that communism always leads to authoritarianism works as an ideological shortcut rather than a serious historical comparison. It isolates socialist states from their material context while treating capitalist democracies as neutral and idealized benchmarks.
Yeah, I will agree there. I think there is an element to which capitalism, in the same way that, like, we talk about white people and ethnic people or whatever, because the Western media is racist and white people are seen as the default, and so everyone else is like an ethnicity. Or indeed capitalists see themselves as the default. Capitalism is just the way it's always been. It isn't remotely, obviously, ridiculous. But it's the only system they've ever known, and so it's the system that just exists naturally. It's human nature, etc., etc. And so, there is a kind of hypocrisy in the way, or not hypocrisy, double standard, in the way in which they will analyse capitalist states as, like you say, kind of neutral, or socialist states as, a fucking weird aberration or whatever. But you have to, I think, I mean, if you're going to analyse, you have to essentially ignore that part of analysis. You have to ignore the fact, or not ignore the fact, ignore the capitalist propaganda, right? And just analyse the actual states themselves, given all of that historical context and nuance. And they're still repressive. Like, you can say, oh, well, other countries repressed. Okay, but you accept that when America represses people, that's bad. Why is it okay when you repress people? If you're just going to do dictatorship, but with the alloy of hypocrisy, how is that better? Surely that's worse. It's insulting to the intelligence of the people you are also oppressing. Did we just get rickrolled? I don't think so.
Yet no capitalist country developed under the conditions that most socialist states faced. Extreme and usually forced underdevelopment, war, foreign invasion, sanctions, economic sabotage, and sustained geopolitical encirclement. It is difficult to find a single capitalist state that ever experienced anything like what historical socialisms have faced. And given comparable levels of siege, it's hard to imagine that they wouldn't have resorted to severe, and likely harsher, forms of repression to preserve their system. The United States itself is the example of this.
Well, I would argue that they already did, by the way. That capitalism's merely, the existence of capitalism, the bringing into existence of capitalism, led was facilitated by way harsher repression. If you look at things like the Highland clearances, if you look at vagabondage laws, things like the toll puddle martyrs, or the transportations of various types of trade unionists and stuff like that. Like literally the violence it even took to make capitalism a thing was worse. But that doesn't mean that socialism, or people who claim to be socialist repressing people, is okay. Just doing a whataboutism doesn't defend your system. Yeah, like if we accept that capitalists being cunts is bad, that doesn't mean you being a cunt but slightly less is okay.
Despite being historically insulated from invasion, having vast natural resources, being generally free from existential external threat on its own soil, despite this, it has maintained significant forms of coercion and repression from its founding to the present. These include settler colonial expansions leading to slavery, racial apartheid, violent suppression of labor movements, intelligence surveillance of civilians, and
what the fuck happened there?
Slavery, racial apartheid, violent suppression of labor, settler colonial expansions leading to slavery.
Oh, he muted. Oh, sorry. I thought that it. I don't know. I thought it was a glitch or something. Okay, so he said the word genocide, which isn't allowed apparently, or makes it unacceptable to advertisers or something.
Racial apartheid, violent suppression of labor movements, intelligence surveillance of civilians, and repeated foreign interventions. These practices developed not under siege conditions comparable to early socialist states, but within one of the most materially advantaged national contexts in history.
And this is all true, all right? But again, this is essentially just whataboutism, right? Don't look at my bad thing. Look at this other bad thing that I don't like did. But like, what about the capitalist encirclement or the foreign invasion and blah blah blah? All of the things you can bring up of external pressures meant that doing the deportations of ethnic groups was fine. Like, they didn't need to fucking do that. What about any of these things made the Holodomor okay? Or the Katyn massacre, or fucking the gulags, or whatever. Like, there are loads of we all know the examples, I think, or people who are interested in this sort of stuff will know the examples of quote unquote actually existing socialism doing repression. There's none of this. None of this makes any of these things okay. To some extent, some of them are understandable, as in, like, we're all human, we can all make fucking dumb mistakes or poor public policy choices which lead to bad things. But collectively, there's no fucking way that this isn't inherent to the system, Marxist-Leninist system. Because it kept happening for decades and decades. Authoritarianism doesn't fucking work.
History. An interesting read to recommend on this is the following book. That should make it clear that coercion and class domination are not unique to socialist systems. Instead, all states exercise forms of coercive power, and all political systems reflect underlying class structures. The difference lies in which class holds power and how that power is organized and justified. Framing the debate in this way shifts the focus from abstract moral labeling to material comparison and structural analysis. From a leftist perspective, the claim that communism leads to dictatorship.
Karl Marx, which by the way is actually quite a cool name. Karl Marx, it's not an imaginary tankie. It's not. If you look at tankie content creators, and indeed the various people who follow these creators, they do excuse these things constantly. They do excuse these things and do whataboutism and say, oh well, the people we didn't like were fascists. Oh, well, kulaks deserve to get starved to death. I've heard all of these fucking arguments. These are not imaginary people. I've talked to people who have defended all of the things I mentioned. And even those that don't defend it and say, oh, it was bad, will do kind of deflection tactics. They'll say, oh, it was because of capitalist encirclement, or it was because of the Civil War, or it was because of this and that, and blah, 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 blah. They'll do, like, apologia. They'll do apologia rather than outright support. Which, like, I don't really give a fuck whether you're outright supporting it or doing a wink, wink, nudge, nudge support of it. Because ultimately, like, this happened 100 years ago, so does it really matter? Sort of no. But, in terms of the political ramifications, I have to say to myself, can I be comrades with a person who is okay with that? Because what about if someone does that now? What about if in a hypothetical socialist situation, we end up with Stalin 2 Electric Boogaloo, and he wants to gulag me? Well, this dickhead next to me thinks it's okay. Because it's for the greater good of socialism, etc., etc. It's revolutionary necessity that Kev gets his fucking face smashed in by the NKVD. Oh, it's supposed to be NKVD? You get the idea. And I can't be friends with people like that. I can't be... That is not a comrade to me. Someone who would happily see me and my family deported. Because I wrote a pamphlet marginally critical of the kind of socialism being implemented by the leadership. Democratic centralism is bullshit. Prove me wrong.
Is fundamentally ideological, because it misunderstands the nature of the state itself. The state is not a neutral institution. At its core, it is an organized structure that monopolizes the use of so-called legitimate force within a given geographic territory. Every state has a class character, meaning that it serves the interests of a particular dominant class. Under capitalism, the state functions as a dictatorship of the bourgeoisie, meaning those with exorbitant wealth and those who own everything.
Whereas under Marxism-Leninism is its dictatorship of the party. Not of the proletariat, of the party, of the nomenclatura, of the apparatchiks, of the Politburo.
This doesn't mean that there aren't elections or multiple parties. It means that political power ultimately operates within structural limits set by capital ownership and corporate dominance. As Marx and Engels described it, the modern state is a committee for managing the common affairs of the bourgeoisie.
Prove me wrong, China. Yeah, no, I agree. Authoritarian capitalism can work. Not in the long term, and not for the good of the people of the place, but it can work, yeah. Well done. You're a capitalist.
So, no matter how many parties exist, if none can fundamentally challenge capital without facing structural constraints, capital flight, media hostility, economic retaliation, institutional sabotage, then political pluralism doesn't negate the class character of the state. The media aspect of it.
And again, this is the defeatism of Stalinism. We have to oppress people. There's no way we can not oppress people. Okay, well, there's no way I can support you then. Fuck you.
Especially potent example in how it's almost entirely privately owned and directly organized so as to meddle in the democratic process and maintain the capitalist system. Check out my video on media here, as well as how everything is so firmly controlled by and for the interests of capitalists here. The decisive question is not how many parties compete, but which class holds power. In France, the US, or whichever democratic country currently, you cannot vote in socialism. Now, under socialism, the aim is to...
Well, under socialism, you can't vote out the party. No matter how corrupt, how authoritarian, how murderous, how genocidal, you can't vote them out. At any point. So again, it's just defeatism. Like, oh, we're just gonna, fuck it. You just don't get a say. Hopefully it'll be fine. No, I think we can and should aim higher than that.
Establish the working class, the vast majority of people, as the dominant class in control of the state.
They're not. That's such bollocks. The working class did not rule the Soviet Union. The working class today do not rule fucking China. Stop lying.
In its early stages, this necessarily excludes the former ruling class from regaining political dominance. Of course. Democracy in this framework is not abstract, it is class-structured. Liberal democracy is democratic for capital, but highly limited for workers. Workers spend most of their lives in workplaces that function essentially as private autocracies, little monarchies.
Okay, and for the most part in socialism, well, not in socialism, in Marxist-Leninism, essentially it was just the daily grind. You were given a fucking work quota and you fulfill the work quota, otherwise you're fucked. They talk about these places like they're sort of working class paradises, and they're just fucking not. See, this is the thing, right? My loyalty is to the working class. Not to a party, not to a political system, not to an ideology. To the people. Which is why I have to oppose Marxism-Leninism as well as capitalism. Because fundamentally they don't represent the people. They are repressors and oppressors and murderers of the people. Your average person in the Soviet Union had no more fucking control over its society than your average American has over current American society. You're two cheeks of the same arse.
Enterprises where owners or executive boards make binding decisions over production, employment, and organization, while workers, who are carrying out all the labor without any meaningful control, have no say. Economic life, where people spend most of their time, remains outside democratic participation under capitalism. Socialist democracy hopes to extend democracy into this sphere. It aims for worker control of the state, democratic organization of workplaces, and economic planning oriented towards social need and development instead of private profit. Mass participation is structured through party organizations or trade unions, popular assemblies, and other collective bodies. But because socialist revolutions directly challenge entrenched property relations, the power of the most wealthy in society, they inevitably provoke resistance.
He's really fucking... He's got a real boner for Kennedy. He's having a dig at Kennedy all the way through. Which, like, don't get me wrong. But, like, Lee Harvey Oswald beat you to it. You know? Just saying.
Now, because of this, revolutionary transformations require defense, internally and externally. The displaced ruling class, after a revolution for example, doesn't simply accept its loss of power. It may attempt economic sabotage, violent counter-revolution, collaboration with foreign powers, or a million other things you can draw from history to find examples of. In these conditions, suppression of counter-revolutionaries would make sense, no? This isn't an arbitrary repression, is my point. If armed groups actively attempted to restore slavery or fascism or violent racial domination, no sensible state would treat this as ordinary political dissent. It would repress it. This is an extension of that thought, because capitalism inevitably results in austerity, immiseration of the working class, and policies aimed
Again, you can highlight
because
that.
Capitalism.
China has brought millions out of poverty. The US has not, by choice. Okay, so you're just in favour of Chinese capitalism instead of American capitalism. Okay, Hakeem, enjoy your capitalism. Have it your way.
Inevitably results in austerity, immiseration of the working class, and policies aimed at increasing the share of wealth in the hands of capitalists at the expense of regular working people. Now, when the struggle hits an entire country, where counter-revolutionary forces hoping to reinstate their land, estates, profits, or massive private ownership, so on and so forth, when they begin
It's so
sabotage
fun
of
to
infrastructure
me.
or industrial disruptions.
It's so fun to me when they'll put up this kind of footage. Because, by the way, I have a lot of love for the Cuban Revolution, actually. But they put up this sort of footage and talk about how, the practical action or whatever. And they, like, when for the most part, these people are just larpy fucks on the internet, right? Now, I admit, I'm just a person on the fucking internet as well. But, like, I'm not LARPing as a fucking revolutionary. Because I'm not. I literally do the joke about how we're all part of the Kevolution. Because, A, it kind of rhymes with my name, so it's a fun little bit of, like, oh, fun. And secondly, like, we're not actually doing a revolution here. It's just fucking content. It's entertainment, right? Hopefully with a little bit of education and, you know, all of that. But it's entertainment. It's fun. That's it. Whereas these people do genuinely sort of LARP as sort of revolutionaries. My favourite ever was fucking Jason Unruh. I wish he did more content because it's so funny. When he used to dress up, he literally had like a suit that was like Mao's suit with like a literally big Mao badge on it. And I'm like, motherfucker, you are the LARPiest cunt I've ever seen.
I'm not playing with all these mutants.
Literally the LARPiest fucking shit. God damn. Anyway. But he was funny. Anyway, hey, hello, Hannah Reloaded. And the Reloaded ites. Yeah, we'll go with that. Yes, I'm Kevin Logan. I'm a leftist from the UK. Hello! You can hit the follow button. We're currently... I don't even know how to describe this. We're self-indulgently rambling on about how tankies are dickheads. Which, like, is very different to the kind of content you will get on Hannah's channel. So... like, it may or may not be of interest to you. If it might be, then by all means hit the follow button and all of that jazz. Or hit the follow button and come back on another day where we do more, like, directly relevant political analysis, etc. Reloaders? Yeah, that would work. Reloaders works, doesn't it? Anyway, hello there, everyone. Yes, let's continue. Actually, chat as well. By the way, this is mainly for people who are sort of regulars, I guess. We would usually end one of these shows off with Soviet Storm, but I'm actually quite tired. And we have been going an hour and a half anyway, so... Stanners, yes. So I might not do that tonight, actually. I might just go to bed, because it is, to be fair, it is 20 to midnight. Now, that's partly because I started later than I usually would, but... leave me alone.
Armed insurrections or foreign-backed destabilization, centralization of the state and its institutions becomes materially necessary so that you survive. Rapid coordination, industrial defense, and political consolidation aren't abstract preferences. They arise from concrete material conditions.
Right, that's true to an extent, right? I can or at least it's understandable, right? What I can't take from tankies is that if the situation had been different, they would have acted differently. Because I don't think that's true. Now, can I prove it? Can I prove that that's the case? No, because it's inside the mind of a person and whatever. But based upon their actions, they don't just support authoritarianism or the consolidation of state power or anything like that on the basis of concrete necessity or revolutionary necessity. They do it because they actually like it. They are the same kind of bootlicker that every other type of authoritarian is, but they have Marxist economics. But they do like the boot thing. They are into the boot thing. Not to kink shame or anything, but you know. I don't think they are that interested in building socialism. They're interested in being the person who has the gun at the camp, you know, at the entrance point of the gulag. They think they would be the NKVD officers smashing out people's teeth for opposing the leader, you know?
The point I'm trying to get across is that historical material conditions are what decide these developments. They don't come out from thin air. Finally, the concept of authored.
No, I didn't say that Hakeem was a Western LARPer. He's a sort of Eastern LARPer, I guess. Like the fact that he grew up in harsher conditions than most Western people did. He's not a revolutionary, is he? Is the point I'm making. Yeah, yeah. And also I was making a broader point. Oh, shit. I was making a broader point about the way in which Marxist-Leninists act, rather than specifically just about Hakim, but yeah. By the way, Quell Marx, can I just say, I'm genuinely glad that you've stuck around. One of the things I find with Marxist-Leninists is they don't tend to. They'll just, you know, snipe a little bit and then leave. So, or just leave like a nasty little comment on a YouTube video and then not respond or whatever. But I've enjoyed our back and forth. You may enjoy some of my other content, but maybe not.
Authoritarianism itself should be scrutinized. I've done a longer video on this before that you can see here. Colonial conquest, slavery, suppression of labor movements, coups, sanctions, and wars carried out by capitalist states are also exercises of coercive power.
Yeah, that's literally true, yes. And that's bad. So why is it okay when you do it?
They're also authoritarian. Yet these are
Yes.
often normalized or treated as exceptions rather than systemic features
Oh, you like my content? Well, thank you.
of capitalism. If authoritarianism means the use of
Yes, literally, that's basically the point, right? It is a feature of capitalism. Capitalism was installed and maintained through violence. Yes. But that's one of the reasons I don't like capitalism. If you have to initiate, sustain, and further your system through violence, I don't like your fucking system either. Now, caveat. Depending on exactly how one defines the word violence. I'm talking in this specific context about extreme violence, mass murder, genocide, deportations, coups, overthrowing democratic government, etc., etc. That's what I'm talking about. Now, of course, having a police force is kind of violence, but most modern nations, in fact, basically all modern nations, have some kind of police force. So I'm not talking about that. Although I have my critiques, but I'm not talking about that. I'm talking about extreme violence. If you have to use extreme violence in order to sustain your system, then your system is shit and needs to die.
coercion, centralization, or suppression of political opponents, then it must be applied universally. The question becomes, why is coercion under capitalism often treated as legitimate or invisible, while coercion under socialism is treated as uniquely disqualifying? Especially
well, because the literally the media you're showing here, I think, is this a Guardian article or something, is capitalist. So in a capitalist media, they're obviously going to treat capitalism as good and socialism as not good. So they're going to excuse the crimes of the former and focus on the crimes of the latter. Okay, like that's to be expected. They're doing propaganda. Like, you can't tell me that Pravda was any more or less propagandistic than the Western media. They're the same. They're doing propaganda. That's literally all they are. They're state organs. Oh yeah, no, ACAB, absolutely. It's on the soundboard. Makes it easier. Anyway, I forgot what I was going to say now. Oh yeah, so I don't know why you're expecting a fair crack of the whip from capitalist media. Capitalist media is doing propaganda against socialism because they don't like socialism. That's why. I mean, to literally straightforwardly answer your question, that is why they don't give you a fair hearing. Because capitalist media exists and socialist media, for the most part, does not exist. There are one or two notable exceptions, but for the most part, the big organs of world quote-unquote news are doing capitalist propaganda. Manufacturing consent, etc., etc. Minus the noncing... not Trotsky. Chomsky. Ugh. Although, of course, Trotsky wasn't his name. Neither was Stalin or Lenin. Basically, none of them were called their real names. They all chose, like, nicknames and things. Or had nicknames thrust upon them. Which is kind of a shame, because Joseph Vissarionovich Dugashvili is much cooler than Stalin. Emmanuel Goldstein. No. No. I appreciate the historical literary joke there, but no.
When the aims are so clearly different between the two. With all that being said, historic socialism has also had excesses and mistakes, sometimes incredibly serious ones. I've covered a few of them.
No, I will absolutely admit that in the Western media, the USSR is not given a fair crack of the whip. Yeah, 100%. Yeah. I wouldn't deny that for a second. Like Brazilian footballers. Yeah, a little bit. Pelé wasn't called Pelé. Socrates wasn't called Socrates, which is a shame because that's a fucking strong name.
In an earlier video here if you're interested. But it's important to realize that these are mistakes specific to their historic.
Is Kevin called Kevin? I'm not sure. Hang on. By the way, there is a Brazilian footballer who goes by Kevin. He plays for Fulham. He's a little underwhelming, in all honesty. Does it have his real name? Yeah, no, Kevin is his name. Kevin Santos Lopes de Macedo? Kevin is Kevin. Fact. Pelé means skin in Portugal. Is that true? Or in Portuguese? I hope it wasn't racial then. Oh no.
Context. We should do better. A better world is possible.
Yeah.
Book recommendations, if you want.
A better world is possible, just probably not under Marxism-Leninism. Just saying. Anyway, yeah, like I said, I would usually end off with the Soviet Storm, which is dope, but I'm tired. I'm tired, and it's nearly yeah, it's quarter to midnight. Yeah. On the topic of footballers, remember the guy playing on a Bulgarian team I told you about, whose name is pronounced just like the Bulgarian sentence "he has beaten up your wife"? I vaguely remember that, Phantom, but you also mentioned lots of weird things to do with Bulgaria, so it kind of it blends into one, really, I think. I wish we'd get some wacky MLs in occasionally. Like, I'd like to see someone try and defend Peron. What? Do MLs defend Peron? Is that a thing? Or is that a typo and you mean something different? Because Juan Peron was not a Marxist or a Leninist or a Marxist-Leninist. I don't know. Anyway, yeah. I'm 99% certain commentators intentionally mispronounced his name to avoid that. Oh, well, that happens in English too, yeah. If someone's got like Christian Fuchs, they always went Fuchs to try and make it sound like they weren't swearing. Or burnt arse. The literally a Swiss footballer called Burnt Haas, but it would be pronounced burnt arse. So they always went Haas to make sure that everyone fully understood they were not swearing. Anyway, Bad Empanada did. What, supported Peron? Really? That's a bit weird. If I remember, I brought it up in connection with to Jizz Watch. Oh yeah, Jizz Hornkamp, the Dutch footballer. Anyway, look, I'm going to fucking bed. Leave me alone, you bastards. Anyway, okay, I'll be back tomorrow. Oh yeah, I'm on Turn Left tomorrow, so I'll be on earlier than I was today. 7:30 kick-off for that. I'm on with Lewis. And we'll be talking about the news, because that's what that show is all about. Who is going... Oh, no, Justice is going. I'll send you over there. Enjoy Navarra media's finest. The Dutch county elections are tomorrow. Well, good luck to the Dutch. Let's hope they don't have an I'm serious problem by electing fascists, which unfortunately is a thing. Where are we? Oh no, she's not on. She doesn't do Twitch anymore, does she? Okay. So who should we go to on Twitch? Cosmopolitics is going, so I'll send you over there. She's American, but don't let that hold it against you. That what? Anyway. I will see you all tomorrow. Stay beautiful. Free Palestine. Free fucking everywhere. No pass around.